What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Good Dads Podcast. I'm your host, Gerald, Mr. BPOZ, as always. And I'm here by myself again. Can't find a guest. So, if you are a dad and you are listening to this podcast, I invite you on to be a guest on the podcast. I would love to sit down and talk to you and allow you to share your story of fatherhood with the rest of us. We like I've said before, we as fathers have a tendency to do our thing in a silo, meaning alone. And I think we would all benefit from listening to stories from dads who are trying to get it together, be great fathers, be great husbands, and be great men with any of us. So I just hope that as I implore you all to reach out, I hope that you take my invitation seriously and reach out to me so that you could be a guest on the podcast. But if you are new here, I'm Gerald, Mr. BPOZ, as I said before. I'm a husband of 17 years this year, actually in October, a month from now, actually. I'll be 17 years married, 4 kids, 3 off in college. And for the next 3 years, it will be myself, my wife, and my youngest son. There's just three of us. It's kind of weird, kind of quiet that everybody is gone and taking these next steps to become adults. And man, it's funny because when you become a parent at such a young age, you know that eventually your kids are going to grow up and eventually move out the same way you did. But I don't think anything really prepares you for when that starts to actually happen. And it's been a huge adjustment for myself, my wife, even my youngest son, to have no one in the house to help entertain him except himself and me and mom. And it's exhausting. The kid got a lot of energy, but I'm happy my kids are healthy. I'm happy my family is healthy and that they are taking these next steps in life, and that we can be a part of it. So nothing but love and adoration for all of those that have contributed in the journey of them getting to those next steps, as well as you all for listening to this podcast and allowing me to share my story every single week. I truly appreciate it. But moving right along, I wrote down a handful of questions. I got some questions from our Facebook group. So if you're not subscribed to the Facebook group, make sure that you subscribe to the Good Dads Club on Facebook. And I asked a couple questions, and I didn't want to look at them first. I just wanted to get them, read them, and then answer them. So we're just going to start from the top, and I'm going to answer these questions, and I hope you find some value in it. So question number one is, what inspired me to start this journey as a dad and content creator for dads? So I guess this means like what is the reason that I am doing the Good Dads podcast and the Good Dads Club and all this other stuff. And in all honesty, uh, I didn't know how to be a dad when I became a dad. Not that my dad, like I have friends who they have fathers, they grew up with fathers. So when they became a dad, they kind of had a model that they can follow. I don't necessarily believe that the model that I had I ever wanted to follow. I love my dad and I wish that I could convey just how important he is to me and the influence that he has had on me as a young man. But I didn't want to be the type of father that he was. My father was very standoffish. He allowed you to bump your heads and sometimes think you're going to drown. And I can 100% attribute and attest that that has definitely made me more resilient, but it also takes a lot of time to learn things the hard way. And when I became a father, I didn't necessarily want every lesson that my child learns to be the hard way. So I wanted to be a little bit more hands on, more proactive, more involved to navigate these steps as my kids grew up. Well, as I was, you know, as I had committed to do that, there weren't a lot of options to kind of fall back on from there, especially where I was from. My best friends at the time, their father was in their lives, but their father, he showed me how to roll my first blunt when I was in high school. He used to roll our blunts for us and take a little bit for himself because we couldn't roll ourselves. So he wasn't necessarily the role model, even though I love that man to this day. He wasn't necessarily the role model that I wanted. So what ended up happening for me is that I basically plinkoed down the line to the $5,000 mark, meaning I bumped my head on peg to peg to peg, hit every side building and wall on my way down, and I learned a lot of lessons along the way. And I believe that we can save more children if we share this information amongst each other and not do things the hard way. I don't believe that every dad's journey needs to be learning how to be a dad in front of their children the hard way. I think that it is probably more feasible for all of us to pool our knowledge together so that we can support each other to be better parents, better husbands, better men and people of our community. And I just, for some reason, like I really feel inclined and pulled to do that. Let's move along to question two. What has been my biggest challenge as a dad, and how did I overcome it? So, so this is kind of, let me see if I can explain this correctly, because the biggest challenge that I've had as a dad kind of alludes back to the answer that I gave in the first question, which is growing up in front of my kids, especially the older two, has been the most challenging because they have very they have very permanent memories about a father that doesn't exist anymore. Especially my oldest son. My oldest son has memories of me being very stern, very strict, uh, real militant because as I I was working through that part of myself in his formative years. So him being 23 now, it kind of it kind of takes him by surprise at how much I'm not as militant. So it's been kind of difficult growing up in front of my kids and then now at this stage like rewriting what the old Gerald did, reframing what the old Gerald did, taking accountability for what the old Gerald did, the old dad, the old father did. That's been definitely and by far the most difficult thing that I've had to work through because it goes kind of far and wide. If I wasn't a good man, then I wasn't actually being a good father to my children. I wasn't being a good husband to my wife. And all of those things are documented and a part of my family story that in a lot of cases I wish weren't a part of my family story. Question three is, how do I manage being a husband and a dad without feeling like I'm dropping the ball in either role? I'd also add uh, being a man, like being myself, right? Like, although I'm a father and I'm a husband, I'm also just Gerald, right? And there are there are things that are important to just Gerald in lieu of Gerald the father and Gerald the husband. But I don't necessarily believe that I have to balance being a husband because my wife and I are on board and with each other. And she's also the most important person in my life, and my kids know this. My kids know that nothing is more important than mom. Like not even them. Like they aren't as important. I used to tell them all the time. I said, in 18 years, you guys are going to leave. You're going to find someone that you love that will be more important to me, more important than me. I mean, I said, and you're supposed to do that. But if I make you the most important thing to me, then who am I going to have when you leave? I said, so I have to make mom important. And that has been the story that I don't let them talk back to her. I don't let them try to disrespect her. I don't let them get mouthy with her. That is my best friend, and you will respect my best friend. Ben said something like this in our podcast. I definitely implore you to go back and check out the episode I did with Benjamin Suyematsu. But he made a statement similar to that. You don't get to talk to my friend. And he told a story about how his wife did the same thing for him. And I think it is extremely important that the togetherness of your marriage becomes the most important thing in your household so that the kids understand their roles and place. I'm not saying that they aren't important. I'm not even saying that they're not the key motivator in your process to become a better person, because my children were definitely mine. I'm trying to write a book at this moment, and in the beginning I told a story about the moment that I saw my daughter for the very first time, and the whole world stopped and changed. And although she may have been a few dozen minutes old, whatever my dreams were prior to that had changed. They had no longer existed, and my sole purpose and focus became making sure that I gave that kid the best life possible, and I was the best father that I could be. And one of those decisions that I had to make in doing that for my daughter was to marry my then girlfriend, because the relationship between her and her mother and me was not going to happen. So I the best thing that I could do for my daughters was to treat their mother great and be the person that they can model after as to what to expect from a person who says that they love you. And I dropped the ball in that. Don't get me wrong. I'm not sitting here, saying that I've done this correctly, because I have not. And I'm sure at some point in time, as we continue to unfold these stories, I'll tell you a little bit more about the maturation in relationship that I've had to do over 20 years of us being together. But I wanted that. My desire was that. So that meant when things came up, when I was doing things wrong, they all had to be on the table for discussion. They all had to be on the table to be changed, because if she was not being treated the way she wanted to be treated, then she wasn't going to be the best mother for our kids that she needed to be. So a part of being a good dad was 100% how I treated her and made her feel within our household. If you aren't subscribed to my How to Be a Good Dad's newsletter, make sure that you are subscribed to the newsletter. It is amazing. Okay. So don't miss it. It comes out every Sunday. Make sure you are subscribed. Let's move on to question number, what's this, 4? The question says, how did I build personal resilience when life got tough? And what advice would I give to dads facing tough situations? This is a good question. I don't know if you build resilience. And let me explain. I think you have to have some sort of a motivation that convinces you to continue the journey. It often comes going back to the story that I said about my daughter in the first time and how it changed me. The resilience didn't come because at the same time I just became a stronger person. The resilience came because it was bigger than me. So because I wanted to be this father so bad that I was going to take the lumps, I was going to take the bruises, the uppercuts, the stabs, whatever it was, I was going to take it in order to give it. And I think for dads out there that are, that see how difficult that it is in life and have gone through some tough situations, some things that I probably can't even imagine on my own, I would say look to something that is more important than you. Look to what motivates you to continue to fight, whether that be your kids, whether that be your spouse, maybe it's God or higher power. But there always is going to be a moment where you have to look to something that is bigger than you, that is greater than you. I know there's a scripture in the Bible from that. So I'm pretty sure you can find that a scripture that resonates or pulls and ties that together. There's a verse in Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, at least, to that, as well as the Tao Te Ching. So this is definitely a philosophical truth that there is something existential that we do have to look to, attach ourselves to, that we can pull ourselves out of whatever mess that we've gotten ourselves in. Some people have immaculate discipline to avoid those situations, but we don't need resilience for discipline. We need resilience for the things that keep knocking us upside down, that keeps beating the crap out of us for so it's not about discipline, it's resiliency. And resiliency means that you've made a mistake or something has happened and now you have to navigate it. So I would definitely say for all dads out there, you got to look to something that's bigger than you. You got to have a motivation that extends beyond just your own needs, because sometimes we aren't a good enough motivator for ourselves. So now we on to question 5. What's the most important lesson I've taught my kids so far, and how did that moment come about? Oh, there's so many messages. There's so many lessons that I've taught my kids, but I think the most important is a little bit of resiliency and hard work. Like the only way to be resilient is to work hard. And there isn't anything in life that you ever want that doesn't come on the opposite side of hard work. And a light way to describe this, or a light example that is actually currently going on in my life, is my youngest son, Gerald, who was on this show, his desire to be a basketball player. And to give you a brief history of my son, he has been wanting to be a basketball player since he was 6 or 7 years old. And he's been god awful. And I have shelled out hundreds and hundreds of dollars for this dream that he has. And he would go to practice and he'd practice and we'd go to games and he wouldn't play but 2 or 3 minutes, and oftentimes wasn't even really good enough to stay on the practice court. But he wanted to be there so bad, but that's all he did. His free time was spent being a really good Fortnite player at like 10, 11, 12 years old. So he spent all of his time playing Fortnite, and then the scheduled time playing basketball, the basketball that we tell him to go to practice and everything else. But he was not progressing. His skills were not progressing. And even if they were progressing, all of his peers were progressing so much beyond him. They were getting better. He was not getting better, or he wasn't getting better at the speed in which his peers were getting better. And I told him one day, I said, "Look, man, if you want to be a basketball player the way that you say, then your work has to match how good you want to be." I said, because I know that you are a good Fortnite player. And I also know that you're not a good Fortnite player on accident. That if I go to your Xbox and I check your timing, you probably spend 20 hours on this game every single week. Now imagine if you spent 20 hours on basketball every single week. How much better would you get? Scratch that. If you even spent an extra 5 hours a week on basketball and only 15 on the game, you'd be so much better. And that lesson kind of permeated with him because he was able to see how much time he had spent in one thing that he actually was good at. And I asked him, I said, in the beginning, were you good at that game? He was like, no. He said, so you actually got better the more you played. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, see? And he goes, yeah, I guess so. And now he's 15. I'm not saying that he's a great basketball player, but I'm saying that he is building the habits to be one. He works out 2 to 3 times a week. We get up at 6 in the morning to go get shots up before school. And it's not because I want him to get up, because trust me, I do not. I do not want to wake up and be at the YMCA at 5 in the morning. I said 6 earlier, but 5 in the morning. I do not want to be there at 5 in the morning, get a workout in until 6:15 to get him to school for 7. I don't want to do that. But he insists, and as a father, I probably need to support that. So the biggest lesson that I've taught my kids in some capacity, in the same way that I've taught Gerald, has been that you get resilience from working hard at it. The more he plays, the more he's going to be able to take the losses and the misses on the court. But when you only practice once or twice a week, and you only go to practice twice a week, and the only shots that you take are within a 2-minute time frame within the game, then you don't have a lot of experience or repetitions to build resilience or build the belief that you can actually be successful, to keep you in the game, to be resilient, if you understand what I'm saying. So that is key. Teach that to your kids. Stay in the game to be resilient, and to do that you have to practice. Next question is, how do I personally handle stress, and what self-care practices help me stay grounded as a dad? Well, if I'm being honest, one of my biggest self-care practices is actually this podcast. I'm able to share my feelings and my thoughts on these podcasts, as well as within the blog. If you haven't read my blog, make sure you go to clubgooddad.com and read them. And I'm able to kind of get it off my chest and then share it with the world as lessons. But I read a lot. I'm an avid reader, so I take some time for myself every morning to read for about 45 minutes to an hour. And then I have a couple hobbies. Like I watch football, play fantasy football, and I have really good relationships with the people in my house. My wife is the most important thing to me, and she's my best friend. And I work tirelessly on trying to be better in that space, so that the place that I spend the most time in, because my home office and studio is in my house, the place that I spend the most time in needs to be peaceful. It needs to be a place of peace. It needs not to add to any stressors that I have. And whatever that means for you, whether that is making sure that it stays clean, or sectioning off your own space that you can retreat to when you need to, like the man cave. This room right here is my office, my man cave, my podcasting studio. I got an Xbox on the wall, watch all my games in here, watch sports in here. And this is my place that I can retreat to because I'm not a huge complainer. So I'm not going to go and voice all of my concerns to my wife. I do need a space that I can go and think about them, to go and fix my own problems, so to speak. That may not be everyone's cup of tea, but it's mine, which is why I have this room. So I would highly suggest that everyone spend some time learning about themselves so that they can figure out what things that they actually need. Find a place of safety that you can retreat to. Find a hobby that you can do and fix the relationships in your home. So if you have broken relationships in your home, because this room is not a hideaway. It's not designed for me to hide from my wife or hide from my kids because I don't want to communicate with them. This is a place for me to retreat so that I can gather my own thoughts. My wife has the rest of the house, so it's not like it's unfair. She can do whatever she wants to the rest of the house, but this 400, 300 square feet is only for me. All right, let's go to question 7, I believe. What's one area of my life I'm currently working on improving, and how is that journey making me a better dad? That's easy. I am working on trying to be consistent. I have a tendency to jump onto something heavy and put my whole heart and everything, my whole heart, soul, and body into it, only to be distracted or have something knock me off of the rails briefly and me never to return it. So a part of the resiliency piece that we were speaking about earlier is actually being consistent to the guidelines that I set for myself. So if I say I'm going to release a podcast every Tuesday, then a podcast needs to be released. And it would behoove me to do the work week to week to ensure that this podcast goes out. And that's all I'm going to do. But regardless of if it is pre-planned or day of, like we did last week, this is going to go out because this is on my list of being consistent. So I'm trying to be consistent in my content creation, my finances, my temperament. What else? There's one more thing I'm being consistent in. I don't know. That's a good 3 for right now. So I'm being consistent in those 3 areas right now. Content creation, I'm gonna forget them anyway. So that's what we're doing. That's how I am trying. That's what I'm trying to improve, is being consistent across the board to the boundaries and things that I have set for myself to accomplish based on the goals that I've set for myself in the future. Last question. What challenge can I give to my fellow dads to help them improve their lives and the lives of their kids? This is a great question. And that answer is simple. There's only one thing. If you want to be a better father, to improve the lives of your children, if you want to be a better husband, to improve the lives of your marriage, if you want to improve your household, to improve the lives of your family, then you have to improve yourself. So if I were to ask you all to do one thing, it would be to take care of the man that shows up as dad for his kids, the man that shows up as husband or babe, in my case, for their wives, or whatever role that you play out in the community. The man that has to do it needs to be taken care of. I do have a free guide for you called Dad First. If you are interested, I will put the link in the description. But I have a guide called Dad First that helps you do that very thing. It helps you to take your own self-care to and put it together in three phases. That's your physical self-care, your mental self-care, and your financial self-care. Because I believe that if a man doesn't have his money right, then they are not thinking right. So we got to get that taken care of. And then there's some work that we have to do on our emotional side and reframing our past and letting go of some of the beliefs that don't necessarily benefit ourselves or our families, that cause us more turmoil, reconciling our differences and things of that nature, how to create boundaries so that you can protect yourself once you have shed the dead weight, so to speak. You can protect that because trust me, when you shed the dead weight, the vultures come in thoughts, in people, in situations, in circumstances. The universe is always going to test if this is going to be the real you or not. So I have all of that laid out in my guide called the Dad First Guide. So if you're interested in that, make sure you hit the link in the description and I'll get that right over to you. I hope you like this format, this structured format where I just kind of pulled a bunch of questions. Those questions were actually pretty amazing. But I'm able to ask and share some of that information with you guys. If there's a question that you have, make sure that you email this directly to me at gmays, GMAYES at clubgooddad.com. I'd love to hear your questions. And if you are wanting to be a guest on the Good Dads podcast and you're a dad with an excellent story or with a story, please reach out to that same email. Other than that, I thank you all for listening. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to you. It doesn't go lightly. I truly appreciate it. And until next week, good dads, y'all take care.